Says podcast recording live at youtube.com/Paul Gallant and twitch.tv/Gallant says weeknights. Still trying to figure out a regular time. Your boy slept in too long today, and it took him too long to get things set up the way that he wanted it. But it's also available wherever you get your podcasts, assuming I post it, which doesn't always happen. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Got any questions for the show, you can email them. GallantSays@gmail.com. Get after me on Twitter, @GallantSays there, @GallantSays on the gram, @GallantSays on TikTok if you ever have a question. It is Tuesday, March 14th of 2023. And it's been interesting the last couple of days. Now that I'm back in Houston, a full NFL season behind me, trying to figure out where Texans fans are now. I was actually texting with Landry Locker, a buddy of mine, earlier today saying, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle many more weeks of how overreactionary that place has become. Texans fans have really gotten a little cuckoo of late. Landry told me, you know what, though? At the very least, they care right now, which I do agree with. It's a lot better than where they were for many points during this past season. But these overreactions I'm seeing aren't just coming from your average fan. They are coming from people that are colleagues of mine, and some of them are so upset about not being able to sign. I don't even remember the guy's name. A center, Jeff Brendel. Sounds like a stand-up comedian. Ethan Posick, I remember covering him in Seattle. You know? Skills Immortal on twitch.tv/Gallant says, comments, Paul, is it bad that I like what Nick's done? There's more moves that could have been made, but generally I'm enjoying it. I don't really think anyone should have any strong opinions on what Nick Caserio's done. You can like it if you want. I think being safe is smart at this point. Talked about it on the radio show and on the podcast the last couple of days. I don't think you should be pissed off, though, about it. This is the time of year where guys are getting overpaid after the team that knows them the best let them walk. That's what free agency is. There was a point where the teams that let players walk weren't willing to meet. It's why you're starting to see so many trades across the league, too. Some teams are starting to realize, well, if I have a guy who's good, but I don't want to pay him, I can probably trade him and get something in return. If I have a guy that's okay and I don't keep him, all right, I might get a compensatory pick down the road. But I think a lot of the guys that you're seeing change teams this offseason are guys that didn't really have that much of a market to begin with. So I would just once again emphasize, relax. And maybe this is a zag. Classic contrarian Paul Gallant here saying that instead of overreacting, we need to underreact. I'm going to underreact. But I do have some hot draft takes for you. Hot free agency takes for you. It's takes on the draft based off of free agency. What do you think the Texans are going to do in a couple of weeks with that second pick on the clock and 6 picks in the first 4 rounds? That second pick, pick 12, pick 33 in the second, 2 third-round picks, pick 65 and 73, and then in the 4th round, pick 104. What do you think they're going to do? It's hard to determine that. I really think that Nick Caserio, general manager of this team and company, they aren't people who share state secrets. It's kind of like the Kremlin over at NRG Stadium. But based off of moves that they've made, moves that they've tried to make, and moves that have happened around them, like the Carolina Panthers trading up from 9 to 1, sending the Chicago Bears, obviously this year's first-round pick, a future first-round pick, 2 seconds, and wide receiver DJ Moore to get up there. Here are some way too early predictions based on that and everything we're seeing from your boy, Paul Stradamus, on what they'll do in the draft, at least early. This is good news for anybody who wants the Texans to draft Bryce Young. I feel pretty confident saying that Young is going to be available for the Texans to draft with that number 2 pick. And maybe I shouldn't be that confident reading this tweet, but I do know the man who tweeted it, and I do believe that he has some connections in the Carolina Panthers. Mark Ryan said, used to work in Houston for a little bit. Now he is up at CBS Sports Radio and The Fan upstate in the Carolinas. Spoke to an NFL source over lunch who told me Carolina is far more zeroed in on C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson than Bryce Young. Almost to the point you wonder if Bryce Young is still being considered. A direct quote. Ryan criticized this, saying, imagine trading a boatload for a project at number 1. Richardson's the project. I think that Stroud is more of a complete product. It's smokescreen season. You heard me really skeptical of the idea that Ryan Poles could get a big haul for that first overall pick. He did. He deserves credit. I was wrong on that front. But you're still having a lot of shit thrown at you this time of year. The details that NFL teams are actually willing to share with the public are details that they believe will benefit them in some way, unless you've just got a lot of loose lips on a ship. And I'd imagine in Carolina there are some loose lips right now, given that they just moved from having Matt Rule as their head coach, and then after that, I'm forgetting the Carolina Panthers interim coach. Looking that up really quick. Steve Wilkes, who actually did all right with Carolina down the stretch. And then all of a sudden, David Tepper says, you know what? No, I'm going to Frank Reich, who had plenty of time to make things work in Indianapolis. Maybe he never got the best opportunity that he wanted to with quarterback. But to go to this new structure that you got in Carolina with David Tepper, a rather impatient owner based off his recent track record. I don't understand that Matt Rule contract still that they gave him. And Frank Reich, who you would think is going to get his pick at quarterback, given that he never really got one in Indianapolis. Why would Carolina benefit by putting out a smokescreen that they're interested in Stroud or Richardson? What does it do to serve them, those close to Carolina, to float that out? And maybe what Mark's hearing isn't that close to the source, but it does feel, just on the outside looking in, like Carolina's a really messy operation. Even if David Tepper's got a ton of money, feels like he's learning the hard way that what works in business doesn't always work in the NFL. It is a crapshoot. I think a lot of businessmen think that they can come into the NFL and they're going to make things work right away. It doesn't generally work like that. So that's the first thing. I don't get how it would benefit Carolina to leak those details. I feel like saying that they're interested in any of those quarterbacks would probably drive the market up for that number 1 overall pick. For anybody who's scouted those quarterbacks, Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson, I think that those players potentially being gone would make teams think very hard about trading up into that number 1 spot, which apparently Carolina wants to do. But that brings me to the second point about this. Why would anyone in the NFL give up a lot to trade up for the number 1 pick with a team that just traded into the number 1 pick? Because the Panthers are going to ask for a ton just so that they don't look embarrassing. That's it. Like, now the asking price has gone up because of the fear of embarrassment. Either the Panthers make a pick with that first overall pick, or if they trade out, they're getting an absolute haul. And I just don't see that happening, because I don't think any NFL team is going to be like, we're willing to trade more than what Carolina did to move up from pick 9 to pick 1. Maybe there's a team that's further back that's thinking that has a couple of first-round picks. But anyway, to bring this all back to the Houston Texans, I think Bryce Young's going to be available for them with the 2nd overall pick. Patriot 1 comments on youtube.com/Paul Gallant. I like the moves thus far. Still expecting a bigger splash or surprise signing. Man, I think you got to give that one up, Patriot One. Think we need to secure our 2 tackles as an offensive line is paramount. I agree with you there. They have been playing that interestingly. I don't know if you want to make too much out of a tweet by Laramie Tunsil, but it did seem like he threw up the H by putting that up. Or maybe he's saying that he picked UT in his bracket. I don't know. But he tweeted that out. I saw someone commented on one of my YouTube videos either earlier today or yesterday who said, we can't give Laramie and Tunsil an extension. He quit on the team in 2021. And maybe that was actually true, but I think that he proved that he's committed long-term to this organization this past year. He played really well. I'm not going to act like I watched offensive line film, but this was a guy who was a borderline All-Pro and definitely was pissed off that he didn't end up getting a first-team All-Pro. And that actually helps the Houston Texans out a little bit, probably, when it comes to what Tunsil can ask for in negotiations. So that Jawan Taylor contract that the Chiefs gave to the Jacksonville Jaguar tackle, that sure as shit didn't help. But I know that Tunsil wants to reset the tackle market. But anyway, things that we've learned from the couple of days of free agency, the tampering window, because technically free agency officially begins tomorrow. I think number one, Bryce Young's going to be available for the Texans with that second spot. 2, I think the Texans are looking to draft a center. I don't know where. Generally, centers are not drafted early. The free agent options that they maybe would have gone after, Jake Brendel in San Francisco. He signed a 4-year deal to stay in San Francisco. Ethan Posick, a guy that I saw play in Seattle, he's staying in Cleveland. So those guys stayed where they are, and I think some people are looking at it as if the Houston Texans could have outbid those 2 teams to bring those guys in. And maybe that's true, but it's not always a matter of money. Sometimes comfort in an idea that you know you're going to be the starter going into next year is important. Scott Quessenberry, I think we can all agree, he is not the guy. But I think they will draft a center at some point. It's a matter of when. Maybe there's a guy that they like that they're willing to draft with that 12th overall pick. But, given the history of the New England Patriots in the draft, there's a chance that maybe they move out of that number 12 spot to try and get more picks. Speaking of that number 12 spot, I know a lot of people have wanted the Houston Texans to go after a wide receiver in the draft with that spot. We're very far away from the draft, and I'll be perfectly honest, I'd be lying to you, like a lot of people out there, by the way, draft analysts, if I said I had any strong opinions about anyone in the draft, even with Bryce Young. Bryce Young was awesome. He was the best quarterback in college the last 2 years. I don't know that means he's going to be a successful pro. But I don't think the Texans are going to be looking for a wide receiver early based off of what they've done in free agency and just based off of Nick Casario's track record as a general manager. I think they want to give John Mechie a legit chance. If you read his scouting profile coming out of Alabama, he does seem like a slot wide receiver based on his size. But if the Texans draft Bryce Young, I feel like that's a guy that Young's got some familiarity with. You brought in Noah Brown today. I really like that signing. I thought Noah Brown played very well for Dallas last year. Their wide receiver core were a mess at times due to Michael Gallup's availability. And when I watched him, I liked what I saw. I guess he's a decent blocker. Robert Woods was a disappointment last year. I really liked Robert Woods when he played in L.A., but Tennessee Titans fans and Titans media have been shitting on the guy since the start of free agency. I guess he was asking for more money. Didn't seem like he got that much. Nico Collins is already there. So those are 4 wide receivers. That doesn't make a great wide receiver core. So I don't think the Texans will be looking for a wide receiver early. I don't agree with that, though. The first has historically been a great place to draft wide receivers. The problem is, if you throw New England's track record into it, and for those Nick Caserio doubters out there, the last time the New England Patriots drafted a wide receiver in the first round was N'Keal Harry in 2019. If you take a look at the entire history of the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick and Nick Caserio would generally go after wide receivers in the second round or later. And for the most part, outside of Deion Branch, and that's going all the way to 2002, they weren't very good at drafting them. Malcolm Mitchell was pretty good too, a fourth-round pick that they got back in, I want to say, was it 2014? Was it 2015, 16? Whatever the case, he had a really good Super Bowl, that game against the Atlanta Falcons, and then the injuries just derailed his career. But other than that, Patriots have been shit at drafting wide receivers. And I think that Nick Caserio knows that that is a position that gets expensive sooner rather than later when you find one. Again, I don't agree with that philosophy that I believe Nick Caserio to have, and I could be wrong about it. Wide receivers are really important these days, but I don't think the Texans are going to draft the wide receiver early. Shelton comments at youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Sign a respectable center and draft young. I don't know if there's many respectable centers left. Then trade back into the first-round pick for Bijan Robinson. It would be nice to have Bijan Robinson. I don't think Mike Boone's going to get a ton of carries. And I hope Rex Burkhead gets no more carries going forward. He also says take Gibbs at 33. You're going to have to give me first names with the draft pick, guys. I don't think they'll be looking for a wide receiver early. Predictions entirely based off of free agency for the Texans in the draft. But I do think that they'll be looking at a defensive line early. And just think about it from this perspective. J.J. Watt was pick 11 for the Texans in 2011. Aaron Donald was pick 13 for the Rams in 2014. The first round is where you can get the best defensive linemen. And I know that maybe you would like an interior offensive lineman or something like that, but they're set at tackle. Trading for Shaq Mason gives them just a much better option at guard than you had with A.J. Cann, who they released. Center is likely not going to be in play early in the first round. And the Texans' defensive line was hopeless last year. I mean, can you name one of their defensive linemen? I guess you're going to say like Roy Lopez or Malik Collins or something like that, but their defensive line was bad last year. They need to do better there, and I feel like that is the perfect place to potentially bolster your defensive line. It's worked out for the Texans in the past, that is for sure. Pick 12 is where I would like to see them go after a defensive lineman, and I do think that they are more likely to go after a defensive lineman with their second first-round pick than they are to go after a wide receiver. Again, I'm making basis and judgment off of what Nick Caserio's track record is and just what I'm seeing in free agency, what the Texans haven't done. Yeah, they brought in Hassan Ridgeway. They got a lot of bodies that they need on that defensive line. I also think we realized today that linebacker is a need for them, and if you didn't know that already, because Jesus, it was a rough watch this past season. They were in on Dallas Cowboys linebacker Leighton Vander Esch at the very last minute. So I think they're trying to give themselves options. I hope that there are some fast guys out there in the draft. Per Jane Slater, he's going to be staying in Dallas for 2 years and $11 million. I don't know where you go after linebackers, but please, for the love of God, get fast guys. The fastest people possible. Christian Harris looked really good when he finally got healthy this past season. And you take a look at Nick Caserio's first draft class. In the middle of the draft where you need to find diamonds, Jalen Petrie, Harris, and Dameon Pierce, that's a pretty damn good start. It's the first rounders you got questions about. Did Derek Stingley play in the right system? Is Derek Stingley going to be able to stay healthy? And then Kenyon Green, too, coming off of arthroscopic knee surgery. That is a tad concerning. 6, they are good at safety as far as predictions that you can make about what the Texans will do in the draft based off of free agency. I love the signing of Jimmy Ward. Ryans, defensive coordinator of the 49ers in 2021, named him a defensive captain then, and he said this about Jimmy Ward. With Jimmy, he's really stepped up and done a great job of leading, and I'm excited for Jimmy to be a captain. The guys love it. Everybody loves it when Jimmy brings the team up and he talks to the team. He always has a positive message, always has an encouraging message to the team, and the guys feed off of Jimmy's energy that he brings. And I imagine that Ward, who was phased out as a safety in San Francisco this past year for former Houston Texans safety Tashawn Gibson. Kind of weird that Gibson supplanted him and he gets moved over to nickel corner. But there's some versatility on that front, and I think that it's very likely that Jimmy Ward's going to be your captain next year. And what a safety duo you'd have. Ward, along with, I'm forgetting his name, Jalen Petrie. By the way, if you're ever bored, and you want to see Jimmy Ward doing something nefarious, on my YouTube channel, there is a fight that Robert Lake, my camera guy when I was doing TV at the Cube 57 in town, I used to do a show called Sports Zone Unfiltered with John Lopez. I also did a show with Patty Smith and John Granado. I missed the Cube. It was a great place. But my photographer, Robert Lake, was out at Texans training camp one day, and he shot the best angle of the Jimmy Ward versus DeAndre Hopkins fight. It's on my YouTube channel. I highly encourage you to check it out if you like fights. Hell yeah. All right, what else is going on here? You can comment at youtube.com/PaulGallant or twitch.tv/Gallant says. Texans heavy episode. Okay, we talked about maybe predictions we can make about what the Houston Texans will do in the draft based off of free agency. Well, all right, let's power rank the free agents thus far. It is 8:30 on Tuesday, March 14th. In terms of the expected impact they'll have this coming season. I don't think any of these guys are changing the world. I don't think any of you should either. The point of this offseason is to get depth and just better players, and you hope that as years go by, that some players will be willing to sign here because they think that it can be a contender in the near future. But I think anybody that's coming in that didn't realize it last year. I think Brandon Cooks didn't realize it last year for some reason. I still don't fucking get that one. How did you think they were going to be a good team last year? I don't get that. They paid you a lot of money to play. Like the Brandon Cooks thing, I still do not get. But as far as Jerry Hughes, that was a great signing last year. I'm hoping Jimmy Ward's going to be able to be that good. Expected impact. Number one has to be Jimmy Ward. I think there's a very good chance he'll be a defensive captain. Number two, in terms of expected impact of Texans free agents thus far, Shaq Mason. The Texans' interior offensive line could not get much worse than it was last year. Noah Brown, the wide receiver they bring in from the Cowboys, is number three. I really liked watching him in Dallas, and I feel like he could easily be one of their top three receivers this coming year. Not a high bar to clear with the way the roster currently is and with Brandon Cooks expected to be gone. I do wonder where Chris Moore fits into the equation, but anyway, I think Noah Brown's going to have an impact. 4, Hassan Ridgeway. He played for DeMeco Ryans. That defensive line does not have a lot of talent. I think he's in almost by default. 5, I've got Robert Woods. There's bad vibes following him from Tennessee. I liked him in L.A., but I don't know what the fuck happened there. Chase Winovich. He's got the Caserio ties from his time in New England. He showed flashes in New England, too. For those who don't know, I grew up watching the Patriots. I am a Patriots fan. Sorry. He seemed to get blackballed there for being himself. I don't think that's necessarily a career killer, but those flashes in New England should have led to more. So it makes me wonder about him. Shouldn't be that hard for him to crack into the defensive line rotation. Andrew Beck is a fullback. He's number 7 for me. 8 is Case Keenum. Optimally, he never plays. Whatever quarterback they take with that second pick will be in there from the start. Mike Boone, the running back, I doubt he makes the roster. I'll say the same thing about E.J. Perry. I don't know what they're going to do with Davis Mills. I think there's been some talk about like what you can get in return for Davis Mills. I guess somebody might think that he's good, but I feel like you're going to get like a 7th-round pick, not even for this year's draft, like next year's draft if somebody decides to trade for him. All right, I wanted to do a little pop culture before I hit the road. But if you got any comments, load them up, youtube.com/PaulGallant. Goyo Falcon, I think the Texans have done a good job. Some people want a star player, but the reality is one player won't make a huge difference. I'd rather have multiple good players than 1 or 2 star players. Top free agents, NFL 2023. I'm just going to look at all of these guys and see if you consider any of them to be stars. The guys who actually went from one place to another. This is from CBSSports.com, the top free agents tracker. So, some guys that are listed here have been brought back to the team that they play for already. Darren Payne, the defensive tackle from the Commanders, 4 years and $90 million. Saquon Barkley got the franchise tag. You've got Daniel Jones at 9, Jason Kelsey at 10, Josh Jacobs at 11. Those guys back with the G-Men. That Jones contract is so fucking crazy. Even if It's not all guaranteed. Kelsey, 1 year, $14 million to stay as the Eagles center. Josh Jacobs, 1 year with the franchise tag. And then you get into the cornerback conversation. Jamel Dean stays with the Bucks. James Bradbury stays with the Eagles. That's a nice move by them. 3 years, $38 million. I really liked Bradbury last year. Tremaine Edmonds is a guy who got on the open market, 4 years and $72 million. Mike McGlinchey, 5 years and $87.5 million. To this point, is there one guy that you think to yourself, yeah, that's going to change the Houston Texans? Javon Hargrave goes from the Eagles to the 49ers, 4 years, $84 million. He might make a difference. Marcus Davenport going from the Saints to the Vikings, a 1-year contract. That might make a difference. Are any of these guys stars? Be honest. Any of them. And forget about whether or not they'd even pick up the phone if Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans were to call them. Are any of those players stars? Hell, I'll put the list up right now at, what the hell is that? Nice little pop-up. Thanks, CBS. I appreciate you. This is what's going on in free agency per the CBS Sports Top 100 list. And I'll scroll through it a little bit slowly, but are any of these guys to you stars? Any of these guys? I'm going as slowly as I can because I realize my face is kind of cutting off some of the list. Who of these guys are stars? I would have liked the Texans to maybe go after Jacoby Myers, who's ranked 29th here. 3 years, $33 million. He signed with the Raiders. There's probably some familiarity there. But any of these guys who are actually available, who haven't re-signed, are any of these guys stars? Or any of these guys impact players? AL Lira won with the correct answer at twitch.tv/Gallant says. Not a damn one. And that's what I'm going to tell anybody who feels like the Texans have been conservative this free agency. It's easy to say that. Give me a guy who they really missed out on. And I feel like you're going to be hard-pressed to do that. Okay. If you got any more comments, I'll work them in. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant, Twitch.tv/Gallant says. We're going to do this thing live weeknights, but you can also get it in podcast form. There's a video that went viral on TikTok the other day, and it has me thinking about the worst dates that we've all been on in life. This is from Daphna_Diamant, who has this story to tell about an awful date that she went on. Here is the video.
Guys, I just got back from a Hinge date. Why am I doing this to myself?
All right, let's stop for a second there. Why am I doing this to myself? Okay, something must have happened. Did she match with somebody who was a catfish? Did she match with somebody who wasn't a good conversation? Why am I doing this to myself? I mean, that implies that she's made a mistake here, right? Well, let's keep watching the video.
So we scheduled to go to dinner. We are sitting at the restaurant. Seems very nice. Not a catfish. Things are going well. And the waitress comes over. She wants to take her order. And I said, okay, I'm going to take the branzino.
Hardo move, going for the branzino on a first date. I don't know. Maybe people like to have branzino on the first date. How much does branzino cost? How much does branzino typically, I'm not a fish guy, cost? It costs like $15.99 a pound per Aquabest. I don't know. It seems like a hardo move to get on your first date. Whatever. It's fine. It's okay. Let's keep listening to her. She got the branzino. What did her possible future love that may have broken her heart on this date get?
And he said, I'm going to take the burger. And the waitress asked him, okay, how do you like your burger? He said how he likes his burger. And do you want some cheese on your burger? And he asked, is this going to be extra? And she says, yes, it's $3 extra. And he said, okay, then never mind.
Man of principle. By the way, cheese sucks. I don't like cheese. Part of it's because I'm lactose intolerant. Part of it's because I ate a bag of mozzarella cheese that was moldy when I was 8 years old and I was psychologically traumatized by it going forward. It's a controversial take that I have on food. But she did not like this as the story continues.
Over there, and I'm like, what the actual fuck? I'm like, okay, I'm hungry. I'm gonna eat my branzino and see what happens. And he's like, oh my god, you have to pay extra for everything these days. And I'm like,
$3 for cheese on a burger does seem over the top. It does. It's New York prices, though, people. If you live up there, this is the way things go. Anyway, Daphne continues.
yeah, it's New York City.
Oh, God, she did that. Jesus Christ. New York people are the worst. Yeah, it's New York City. New York really thinks very highly of its food. I do tend to think it's very overrated compared to Houston, but whatever. That's me. And she's got a different perspective, and we have to let her share the rest of her story, her truth.
I got my branzino, he got his burger, we were eating. And once I was satisfied, I got up and I was like, I'm going to the restroom for a second. And I took my purse and I went to the waitress and I was like, hey, I just want to pay the bill. And I just paid the bill and walked out of the restaurant, and I texted him. So I texted him, the check is taken care of, you should have gotten the cheese. And I blocked him.
Okay, so not all of this is bad. She's getting crushed on TikTok. I actually don't hate the idea of getting up and paying the bill. It's weird that this bothered her, right? I don't hate the idea, though. If you're going to leave a date early, well, at the very least, this person is not paying for his meal. But I think it's a pussy move to not tell him that. You could pay the tab. You could go up to him and say, I think it's kind of weird that you were cheap. But I don't know. I feel like you're looking for a reason to leave, not based off of the being cheap there. I don't think that this is about the actual money. I just don't think you like the guy. So you could have offered to split the check there. You paid it yourself. That is a somewhat noble gesture, but it is really strange that in this spot, she just left. I think it's pussy stuff. If you were on a date with somebody else, I think you got to be honest with them about why you don't like them. It's good practice for you going forward. Instead of just doing little microaggressions and passive-aggressive movements, communicating with somebody else what you like and what you don't like is actually really important. This person's in her 20s. She's getting crushed online. I'm not going to continue with the crushing here. I think it's kind of ridiculous that she considers this to be like a really bad dating experience. Like, oh my God, why do I keep doing this to myself? You're picky, probably, and there's nothing wrong with being picky. But in this situation, you could have handled it differently. I think posting a TikTok about it, what did you expect was going to happen? Did you think people were going to take your side? It is rather tone deaf. But you could have done all of these things, and you could have told him that you were leaving, but to say, like, we should have gotten the cheese and block him, I think he's going to be just confused. And you say, we should have gotten the cheese. You should have gotten the cheese. But maybe he doesn't like cheese. Maybe that was his way of saying he's lactose intolerant. AL_Lira1 says, I would have added 2 slices of cheese after. You can do whatever you want here. I'm just offering advice for the youths. Because dating fucking sucks. I'll tell you that as a 33-year-old. I'm not going to act like I've always been good on dates. I feel like I'm pretty good on a first date, but I don't know what the other person's perspective is. And I had a really shitty date on Friday. Went to the rodeo with somebody. We had hung out like a week before. It went really well, I thought, that first time we hung out. But after that date was done, this is where it got a little dicey. The second date, we go, I meet up with her friends, and there's, I guess, some backstory where we got separated for a moment in time. But she tells me as I catch up with her, hey, I'm going to go talk to other guys now that I'm interested in. And I'm like, what? So I just sort of sit there and I pause. And I'm like, what the fuck? In my head, I didn't really know what to say. So she just walks off. And I wouldn't have minded this if this happened like in a place in public or something like that. But what sucked about this is you're at the rodeo. It takes fucking forever to get out of the rodeo. It takes forever. Like, you got to walk down the NRG Stadium. You got to go get an Uber. It's going to cost like $80. Like, it's just a fucking train wreck trying to leave the thing if you didn't drive your car there. And I didn't. Maybe I was a little bit assumptive thinking that I wouldn't need a ride home. But whatever the case, that sucked. Had that person, I don't know, waited till the end of the date to say those things, I think that's where you do it. But in classic Paul Gallant gets angry at things all the time fashion, I just decided instead to go get a shit ton of beer. Probably sent texts I don't... I wish I hadn't. Whatever the case. I wish this person the best. But yeah, this ain't happening anymore. But anyway, that's a dating story for me. We all go through bad dating situations. I think communication at the end is good. Goyo Falcon on YouTube says, I dated a girl once from New York, and everything was going fine until I brought up sports in the conversation and told her the Astros are my team. She got mad and left. I'm guessing you talked a little shit. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, when I was in Seattle, I matched with somebody, and she was asking me who my favorite football team is, and I said the New England Patriots. And she asked, like, wait a second, you support the Patriots? Tom Brady supports Donald Trump. The Patriots are cheaters and racists, and like just went off on like a spiel. And I was like, wait, what? I'm from Boston. That's it. It's that simple. And she couldn't get it through her head. She just unmatched me. And I was like, all right, dating's hard these days, guys. But I think that communicating is great. If there's something about your date that you don't like and you don't want to see them again, tell them why. They should do the same to you. They probably won't, but I think communication helps them get a little bit better. And my hope is that we all start paying it forward at some point in time. But anyway, that has been dating advice with Paul Gallant. Also, make sure you're more dates in when you go on a date to the rodeo with somebody. Unless you expect it to go disastrously. Anyway, I appreciate you guys joining me for today's episode of the Gallant Says podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can also get it live weeknights, twitch.tv/Gallant Says and youtube.com/Paul Gallant. I thank you so much for your support. If you haven't subscribed to whatever thing you listen on or whatever you watch on, please do. Every little bit helps. I have a cat to feed. So long. Farewell, and have yourselves a